Hey there, welcome to the session on microservices. So as a reminder, if you are watching my videos for the first time, then this particular video is a part of microservices series where we are building an application using a monolithic architecture first using Spring Boot, and then we are converting that application into microservices. So we are getting a complete hands-on experience as to how a monolithic application is converted into microservices. So if you are new to this particular channel and if you are not aware of the previous videos or if you have not watched them, I would highly recommend that you do so to get some context as to what is being taught and what source code is being used in this particular session. So to get access to this free playlist, you have to head down to the description of this video and you will find the link to the complete playlist that covers all of this. Now talking about what we are going to cover in this session. So this session is going to be about restructuring our monolithic application into microservices. So we are going to go to every entity, like every component, like we have companies, we have jobs, we have reviews. We are going to revisit each one of them and we are going to restructure them into microservices. Okay, so if you are new to this channel or if you are a regular viewer but you haven't subscribed, then you should absolutely hit that subscribe, like button and also hit the bell notification icon, because this would motivate me a lot to bring such free amazing content for you all. And without a further ado, let's dive in. Welcome back. So let us start talking about the changes that we are going to do to our application so that we can migrate to the microservices architecture. So this is our application so far, which is being run right now as a monolithic architecture on a single server. So we are going to transition to an architecture that looks something like this. So we have a browser from where we are sending a request to the application, and we are having three microservices in our application. So this is the company microservice, the job microservice, and the review microservice. Now each microservice has its own database. So you can see review database, there is a job database, and then you have a database to store the company. And every microservice is also running on its own server. So there are three different servers that we are running. So this section is going to be about this transition wherein we refactor our application to start accepting requests from the browser. So company can receive the request from the browser. The job microservice can receive the request as well. And the review microservice can even receive the request. And this here can be browser or can be Postman. So this is what we are going to implement with our application. So how are we going to structure our microservices? So we are going to have three applications running on three different ports. For example, we have company microservice running on port 8081. We have jobs microservice running on port 8082. And reviews will run on the next port, which is 8083. And these three microservices are going to be three separate Spring Boot projects. So in order to create separate microservices, you can create separate Spring Boot projects so that you can configure all the dependency that microservice will need. So that is what we are going to do. So we are going to break down a single application, which is in monolithic architecture, into three different parts. And they will be responsible for running as a single application. So for the end user, it will be like they are interacting with a single application, but in the backend, you have three different microservices running on three different ports. Okay, so that is how we are going to structure. So let us begin creating our first microservice, which is the job microservice. So here I'm on our favorite website, which is start.spring.io, and we will have to create the microservice using the Spring Initializer tool. So I'll choose some configurations over here. So I'll say we need a Maven project. This is the version of Spring Boot that we want. Language is Java. I'll specify the group over here. So group ID is com.embarkx. And the artifact can be job ms, like so. And here I can say microservice for job application, like so. I've selected jar and the packaging can be jar, and we are using Java 17. If you want to choose any other version of Java, that's completely okay. You can choose to do so. Now, in terms of dependencies, we will add a few dependencies, like we'll say web. So we will be creating a web application. Then I'll add dependency for JPA. Okay. So I'll say JPA. And let us check our project as to what all dependencies we had. Okay. So we have Spring Boot Starter Web. We have the JPA dependency. We have H2 database. Okay. And then we even have we have the PostgreSQL as well. Okay. So let us add PostgreSQL. So I'll head over and here I'll add PostgreSQL. So you can either create the microservice with the H2 database and then later on migrate to PostgreSQL. So I'll do that. I'll later on switch to PostgreSQL and I'll have H2 database here. Okay. So our configuration is done. Let us generate the project. Okay. And you can even go to explore and check whether everything is added. So this is what we need. So what I would request you all is to download this project and come back and open the project with Intellij. So I have downloaded the zip file here and I have extracted the zip file here. Okay. Now what I can do is I will switch over to Intellij. I'll go to File, Open, and I can open the project. So I can select Job Microservice, like so. I'll say OK, and you can open this in a new window. Okay, so I'll say a new window and it opens up like so. So we have another instance of Intellij running and you have the job microservices appear over here. Okay, so it will do some indexing and our project setup is done. Okay, so this is our microservice that has been created. Okay, we have successfully created a separate application. Okay, and we will be working on this further. So I have the job microservices project open in a separate instance of Intellij. Okay, so I have this one open here and the monolithic application open here. So I have moved this to a separate desktop. Okay, now what we are going to do is we are going to move all our code in the form, like all the code that relates to job will come into job microservice. So what we are going to do is all the code that relates to job application will move to job microservice. So I'm going to create a package here. I'm going to call this package as job. Okay. And I'll head over to my application here and I'll open the Java folder. Now, whatever Java job related files I have, I'll just copy this entire package. Okay. So I can delete this one, in fact, because I'm copying the entire package itself, and I'll paste everything over here. So you can see we have all of this being added here. Okay, so we have copied all the files. Now, when we copy all the files, let's see what all errors we get here. So the number one error that we are getting here is company. So company does not exist. Okay, so every job has a company entity over here and it is a many-to-one relationship. Okay, so we will have to refactor this because we can no longer access the company. Okay, What I'm going to do is I'm going to remove the many to one mapping, and instead of company, I'm going to have long, and I'm going to store the company ID like so. So let me make the view bigger, and so we don't have anything in the constructor, but here we have getters and setters. So I'm going to remove these getters and setters. Do we have anything else? No. So I'll just add the getters and setters for this new field that we have generated. So I'll say getters and setters, company ID, long, like so. Okay. Now I can also optimize the imports. So here we don't need the company. Okay. So I'll remove this import statement here. Okay. So this is job. Now let us take a look at the job service. Now here everything looks fine according to me. So we have this find all, then we have create a job, then get job by ID, delete job by ID, and update the job, which is okay. Let me also open up the service implementation. So here, of course, we are getting some errors now. So let us take a look. So the error is because the package has changed. So I'll have to re-import all of this. Okay, so I'll say job service. Here I'll say job repository. And here I'll say job. Okay, so I've imported everything and rest all looks superb. So there are no changes to be made here as well. Now let us head over to controller. So here in controller, let us see if there are any red marks. So I don't find any red marks over here. Okay. And I believe the controller also looks good. Okay. Now what we can do is let us head over to application.properties, and here we will have to set up some configuration. Okay. So I'll have to say server.port. So we need to run this particular service on 8082. So I'll mention that as the port. Okay. I'll also have to say, like, I have to configure the H2 database. Okay. So I'll say Spring data source dot service URL dot default. Data source dot URL. Okay. And I can copy the URL from here itself. So here in application.properties, we had this configuration. Okay. So I can just get all of this configuration. Okay. And save a little bit of typing. So I can paste it over here like so. Okay. And let me uncomment this. So this looks good. We'll keep the database URL also same. If you want, you can change it. Okay, that's perfectly fine. But since it's an in-memory database, we can keep the URL same. And rest all looks good for me. Okay. Now what we can do is we can run our application. So I'll say run. So I'll go to this job ms application file and I'll run this. Let us see the logs. So we are able to run the application. Okay. And the application has started. Now let us switch over to Postman and let us check. So here in Postman, what I'm going to do is I am going to create a new, and let me tell a collection. So I'll create a collection here and I'll call this collection as job ms. Okay. So this is job microservice, and I'll duplicate a few URLs. Okay. So first of all, I'll close all the tabs. Okay. And I'll save all the changes. Okay. And I'll get everything closed. Now I can duplicate like the post request here. Okay. I'll duplicate this one and I'll move this one to this microservice folder, and then I can get all the jobs. So I'll duplicate this one and I'll move this to microservice folder, and so all the URLs that are related to jobs I'll duplicate and I'll keep them separate. Okay. So instead of doing this, you can even make use of environmental variables, okay, in Postman. So here I have this done. Now I'll replace the port numbers. So I'll say 8081/jobs and I'll say 8081/jobs like so. Okay. Now here I'll say, so this will also be 8081 and I'll copy this and this will also be /jobs. Now same goes for all the URLs. Okay. So we need to modify these URLs so that like we have a clear distinguish between what is microservice and what is not actually. So I'm just doing this. So we are done. Okay. Now what I can do is I can run this to fetch all the jobs and we get an error. Okay. So this does not work. Let us check what happened here. Okay. So the application is running, let me see, 8082. Oh, sorry. So this is on 8082 and we are trying to access on 8081. So we have entered the wrong port number. So this needs to be 8082. So jobs is on 8082. So I'll just change the port number everywhere. So after doing all the changes, okay, just make sure you save all of them. And now let's try to access the API to get all the jobs. So here you can see you are getting no response. Okay. Let me create a job. So I'll post a job and this is the job body that I'm trying to post. Okay. Of course, the company does not exist. Let us see what happens. So you will see job added successfully. Okay. It's 201 created. Now, if we try to get the jobs, you'll see the company ID is null. Okay, so we have added company ID and that is null. So how do we add company ID here now? So I'll say company ID. Okay, and since it's no longer an object here, so I'll change the request to that of this. Okay, and I believe this should work. Now let me add one more company or one more job. Okay, and let me track the output. So you will see company ID appear now as 2. So this is the request and this is how you're supposed to send the request to create a job. Okay, now we are maintaining the relationship here with the company. Okay, so the company ID is 2. Now if you try to get a single job, okay, this API should work fine. So if you say job with ID 2, it will give you the job with ID 2, which works fine. And you can even delete the jobs. So this job with ID 1 is deleted now. And if you try to get all the jobs, you have only one job now. So the one with ID 1 is deleted. So yeah, we are done refactoring our application and we have moved the code to the microservice structure. Okay, so here now this particular job application is independent of like all the other dependencies and it is running as a standalone service. Welcome back. So this time we will move on to create the company service. Okay, and we are already on our favorite website, which is Spring Initializer, which is at start.spring.io. So we are going to define some configuration for our company service here. Okay. So I have some configuration already set over here. So I'll select Maven, Java is selected, and the latest version of Spring Boot is also selected. So this is something that I'll make sure. Then I'll keep the group same like com.embarkx. And instead of artifact, I'll say company. So I'll say company MS. And here in the description, microservice for company application. And the package name is auto-generated. I'll make sure that jar is selected with Java version 17. And I'll also have these 3 dependencies added. So we'll have Spring Web, Spring Data JPA, and the H2 database. Okay, and I can explore if I want to, like I can check the dependencies, how are they being added, or I can download the entire project structure. So what I would suggest is download the entire project structure and let's get ready to import this application into Intellij. So I have downloaded this project here, which is company microservice. I will get this extracted over here. So I'll say extract here. So we have this folder here. Now what I will do is I will head over to Intellij IDEA. Okay. And I'll say file, open. And here I'll collapse job MS and I'll switch over to company MS. So I'll select this company MS over here, which is company microservice, and I'll say OK. Now when I'm being prompted, like where would you like to open the project? I'll say open in new window. So you can open it in this window as well, but the thing will be the job microservice will go down. So this instance of Intellij will shut down. It will close the job service project and then open company microservice. So you can do that, or else I'll choose new window. So I have new window. Now I'll move this window to a new desktop so that it's easy to work around with. Okay, so I did a full screen to company microservice. And here we have the entire project structure. Okay, we have all the dependencies that we added on Spring Starter website. Okay, now what we need to do is we need to head over to the main folder over here, and we need to go to the monolithic application we have over here. So we need to copy the company folder. So I'll copy the company folder that we have, and I'll paste this company folder here in this package. I'll say OK. So I have the company files coming up over here. Okay. Now let us go through each file one by one. Now in the company entity, we have a mapping for jobs and we have a relationship for reviews. Okay. We can keep this relationship by storing the IDs. Okay. So we can have IDs over here like private long job ID and private long reviews, something like that. Or long won't work. We will have to store the list of values because it is many to one, like one to many. I'm sorry. So what I will do is I will remove this. Okay. And I will even remove this from here. Okay. And I'll delete this from here. Okay. So this is done. Okay. So I'll hit save. And I'll fix the imports over here. Okay. So imports are fixed. Now I can go to controller over here, and in controller I'll check for anything. So there is nothing that requires my attention. Let's go to service. So in service also, I believe it looks good for everything, and I can go to implementation class. So let us take a look over here. So this has a few errors. Okay, and the reason is because the package has changed, so this should be removed and I need to re-import everything. So I'll say company service here. Here I'll say company repository, and here I'll say company. So I believe the error have gone, and I need to remove this line here wherein we are setting the jobs because this setter method does not exist. So yeah, it's all clean now, and I'll hit save, and company controller is working fine as discussed. Okay, so it's all good. Now let us configure some details like properties. Okay, we need some properties that we need to add over here. So here I can say server dot port is equal to 8081. Because we want this microservice to run on 8081. Okay. Now let me check the configuration for this particular microservice. So this is a job microservice. I'll copy the configuration for H2 database. Okay. And I'll add the configuration over here. Okay. Now what we can do is we can run this microservice. So I'll go to company MS application and I'll run this particular microservice. So let us wait to see this running. So it has started the application. Now we'll head over to Postman and let us try querying the microservice. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to expand this a bit so that I can see. Okay, so let me close all the tabs. I'm going to save everything and close. Now here I'll duplicate this request. Okay, and I'll also create a collection here. So let me create a collection. So this is a new collection. I'll say company MS, which looks good. Okay, and I'll expand this. Let us move this over here. Okay, so this is moved, and then we have the put request for company, which I'll duplicate. Then we have the get request for all the companies, which I'll duplicate. And then we have a way to get a particular company, which I'll duplicate again, and a way to delete a company. Okay, now you can select all of this. Okay, so I'll select all by pressing Control on my system, and I'll move all of this to company MS like so. Now let us change the port numbers. Okay, so I can say 8081 here. Okay, and we'll update the port for every request that we have. So this is 8081. This will be 8081 as well. Okay, this will be 80812, and this one will be a new port as well. So here, since our microservice is running on a new port, we need to make sure that the ports are correct. So we are done with the changes now, and let us start testing. So let us first get all the companies. So I'll get the list of companies. You are getting an empty array list, which is fine. Now let us try creating a company. So here I have a company that is being created. So I'll say company 1. It's created, and I can get the company again now. So you will have this company that exists. You can get a particular company. So I'll say, give me the company with ID 1, which works well. Company with ID 2, which says not found. And you can even delete the company. So this will also work fine. Okay. So all the endpoints are working well with this microservice. Okay. So I hope you have been able to follow this refactoring part, and you are able to access all the company URLs, okay, the URLs that point to the company microservice. So one mistake here that I can see, this would be 8081 and not 8082. Okay, so this is how it should be. And now if I run this, it will be deleting the company. And if I try to get this should work. So yeah, so we are done refactoring the company microservice. Let us begin creating the review service, and we will head over to Spring Initializer. Make sure Maven is selected, Java, and the latest version of Spring Boot. And here I'm going to say review MS, and I'll rename this to review. So rest all the configurations remain the same, like company and job microservice. So we need to make sure packaging is jar and Java 17 is selected, and we need to have these dependencies added. Okay, now I'll hit generate and I'll download the zip file. So I have downloaded the review microservice zip file. Now I'll extract this file over here, and you will see this folder appear, review MS. Okay, so this is our source code, and now what we need to do is we need to head over to Intellij, and I'll say file, open, and we will open the review microservice. So I'll collapse all of this and I'll select review MS. I'll say okay, and I'll open this in a new window. So here we go. We have the project up and ready for review microservice, and we will start refactoring the code here. So right now I have the review microservice open in Intellij, and this is a new window of Intellij IDEA. So what we can do is we can go through the structure over here. Like you can check all the dependencies that we have added. And here under main Java, I'm going to add all the source code that we need for this microservice to function properly. So I'm going to head over to our monolithic application here. I have it open. And here I will copy the review folder or the review package. And I'll go to my microservices application and I'll right click and I'll say paste. So I've added all the code that existed in my monolithic application, and we will start going by each file one by one. So let's take a look at the review file. Now over here, we have a many-to-one mapping wherein we are mapping company object over here. So instead of having the company object, we don't have company object in this particular microservice. So what we will do is we will say private long and company ID like so. And I will scroll down here. I will remove these getters and setters like so. And I will generate the getters and setters like so. Okay. So this is done. We need to clear some imports as well. So the imports are optimized as well. Okay. So the review class is done. Now let us take a look at the review service. So this looks good. And if we take a look at the implementation, this will have some issues. So I'll remove all these import statements. These issues are just because we have changed the package name. Okay, you can even refactor the package. So if I say review ms over here, and if I remove this part, okay, so if I copy this, so company service does not exist. So we will get rid of this. Okay, now here I'll say review ms, and review ms. So this should work perfectly fine. Okay. Now over here, we have this dependency added for company service, which we will have to get rid of since microservices should be standalone and they should not be dependent on anything. Okay. So I'll remove it from the constructor as well, like so, and I'll get this deleted as well. Okay. Now let us scroll down and let us evaluate the dependencies that we have. So here we say long company ID. Okay, so we are getting the company ID and here we are getting the company object. So instead of getting the company object, we will have to say review.setCompanyID. Okay, so I'll have to delete this. Okay, and I'll have to remove this if condition as well. Okay, so here I'll have to say review.setCompanyID. Okay, and I'll have to pass in the company ID over here. Okay, so you can add a validation to check if the company ID is null or something like that. Okay, so I've kept this validation here. All right, so this will check if company ID is not equal to null. Okay, and we will add one more validation where we'll check and review is also not equal to null, like so. I'll scroll down here. So get review looks perfectly fine. There is no need to change this. So get review gives us the list of reviews that we have. Okay. Okay. So here I believe we are filtering by the company ID. Okay. So this should work fine. Now, if we scroll down to update review, okay, here we are making use of the company service object. So here I can just check if the company ID is not equal to null. Okay. So in fact, we don't need the company ID over here. So I'll get rid of this. We just need review ID and the updated review. Okay. So here I can say if review ID is not equal to null, then what we will do is we'll say updated review. So here I'll create a review object. So we need the review object to exist. So I'll say review updated review. So review is equal to repository. So I'll get the repository dot find by ID, and I'll pass the review ID over here. Okay. So we are getting the review by ID here. Okay. And this is saying that it has to be optional. So I'll say or else null. Now we can validate against this. Okay. So if the review is not found, okay, then we can say, so I'll get rid of this. Okay. So I'll say review dot set, and I'll set all the fields. So I'll say set title. So updated review dot get title. I'll duplicate this review dot set description, and I'll get description here. I'll duplicate this again, review dot set rating. I'll get the rating here. Okay. And we can set the company ID as well. So rating, title, description are done. We can set the company ID as well. Okay. And we will save the updated review over here. So I'll save the review over here like so. Now I'm getting on an error on this like override annotation over here. So I'll go over here, and here I need to get rid of the company ID. In fact, we'll have to get rid of company ID from all. Okay. And the reason is we don't want any dependency over here. So let's see if we can do a lot of things without getting the company ID. Okay. So we had company ID for validation. Okay. But we don't have the company entity over here. So we don't need, so we can remove it from a lot of places. So from here also I'll get rid of this. Okay. And here I am going to say review is equal to get review by ID, or I can say repository dot find by ID, and I can pass the review ID over here. Okay. And since this is optional, I'll have to say or else null. Now I can say if, so I'll remove this. If review is not equal to null, okay, then what are we doing? So I'll just get rid of all of this, and I'll say review repository dot delete. Okay, I can say you can even pass the review directly, or you can delete by ID. Okay, so I can delete by object itself. So I'll delete this, and I'll return true, or else I'll return false over here. Now since we made a change over here, so I'll go to review service, and I'll get rid of this over here. Okay. Now we have company ID in get review and add review. Okay. So let us go to get review. Okay. So here we are getting the review by ID, and I don't think we need company ID over here. Okay. Now why are we getting rid of company ID over here? Because it's a separate microservice now. Okay. And we don't want any dependency on the company ID. If you want to get a particular review, you can directly pass in the review ID. Okay. So here find by ID, I'll say. Okay. So here instead of reviews, I'll just get rid of all of this. Okay. So you can say return review repository like so dot, and I can say find by ID here, and I'll pass the review ID. Okay. Dot, I'll say or else. Okay. So this returns an optional. So I'll cut this, and I'll say review is equal to, or I'll say over here or else null like so. So if we don't get the review, we are passing in null. Okay. And here in review service, I'll get rid of this thing over here. Okay. even for adding review, let us see if we need the company ID. So for adding review, I believe we need the company ID. And that is because we will be saving the company ID over here. Okay, so we're checking if the company ID is null or not, and then we are setting the company ID, which is okay. So this is done. Now let us take a look at the controller. So here in the controller, if you take a look at the URLs, these URLs are dependent, or so they talk about the companies over here. Okay, but this is a separate microservice, right? So let me switch over to PowerPoint slides and let me explain this better. So these are the URLs that we had in our monolithic architecture, using which we define the URLs for the review entity. Okay, and as you can see in our current design, we have reviews nested under companies. Okay, and this implies that review service needs to know about company service. But in microservice, this is not the right approach. So in microservices, you need to be able to operate reviews independent of the companies. And that is why we need to restructure these URLs. So the new URLs can look something like this. So these are the new URLs. And as you can see, like here, we were accepting the company ID as the URL parameters. But here we are taking it in a different format. So here, this was being presented to us as the path parameter. Okay, like within the URL path, we had company ID. But here we are taking it as the query parameter. Okay, and this is a difference, and this allows us to change the URLs. So it allows us to define the URLs starting from reviews, /reviews. So whenever you are saying /reviews, it means you are accessing the review microservice. Okay, so this would be the right approach. And you can see over here, post, we have passed the company ID over here. So here, instead of path, like having the parameter in the path, we are passing it here in the form of query parameters. Okay, and whenever we need review ID, we are passing that as a part of the path. Okay, so that is not going as the query parameter. So let us do this restructuring. And the reason for this restructuring is because our microservices are loosely coupled. They have their own domain of responsibility and they need to know less about each other. Okay, so they need to be independent. So we are moving towards independence here. Okay, so I'll switch over to my ID. Okay, and here in the controller, we will have some definition. So this would change to /reviews. So I'll say reviews. Okay, here. Let us take a look at, so this thing is okay. Now let us take a look at individual mappings. So you have /reviews. So here /reviews is not needed actually, because we have a REST controller mapping at the top, or request mapping annotation at the top. Okay, not the REST controller. I meant request mapping. So we have this. And this one should work perfectly fine. We don't need any changes here. And we are adding a path variable here. So this is not a path variable now. So this is now a request parameter. Okay. So request parameter, and we'll call it company ID, like so. Okay. Now over here, this is the post request, like the post mapping. Okay. So we don't need to specify this. Okay, we can skip this because we have the parent request mapping there. And here we were accepting this as the path variable. Okay, so company ID was coming in as path variable. So I'll change this to request parameter. Okay, so request parameter means it is coming in this format now, like after the question mark. Okay, and path variable was like this. All right, so we just need to restructure that. Okay, so I'll restructure this, and request body is review. Okay, now what we are doing is when adding review, we are checking if the review is saved, we are giving the response, and if not saved, we are returning an error. Okay, so this is the method or the mapping that enables us to get a particular review. Okay, so here I'm going to say, so this will be /reviews, and this can go. So this is defined over here at the top. So I'll say /review ID. And here we'll say get review. Okay. And here we don't need the company ID. Okay. So because we have changed the method here in the service. So if you go to this method, we have removed the company ID. Okay. So if you come to controller, we'll get rid of the company ID. And we can get rid of this entire path variable. Okay. Like so. Okay. So this is sorted. Now if you scroll down, we have this put mapping. So we can get rid of this. Okay. And this will be the put mapping. Now here we have path variable company ID. Okay. So path variable company ID is not needed. Okay. We can get rid of this here. Because if you take a look at the update review, so here we don't need the company ID now. Okay. So here I'm going to just remove that variable and I'll get rid of this part as well. Okay. So this is sorted now. Okay. We have the path variable for review ID and the request body is review. Now if we scroll down over here for delete mapping, so here I am going to remove this part. Okay. Because this is a part of request mapping now with the controller. And here we are accepting the company ID again. Okay. Which is actually not needed. And we have already modified this method. We have removed the company ID. So we can get rid of this. Okay. So our microservice is sorted now and it's it's independent of company. Now let us run this and let us test our changes. Okay. So I will run this. Okay. Let us see if this runs without any issues. Okay. So we missed something. So it's trying to run on 8080 and the thing we missed is the configuration of application.properties. Okay. So I'll switch over to company microservice and here I'm going to copy the application.properties that we have set up. Okay. Now in review microservice, I'll paste this application.properties. Okay. And I'm going to make the modifications in this particular file. Okay. So I'm going to change the port, which is 8083. Okay. And rest of the configurations remain the same. Now let us run this. So let us see if we are able to successfully run this particular application. So this works perfectly fine. Okay. Now let us switch over to Postman. So here in Postman, first I'll create a collection, a new collection. I'll call it review MS. Okay. And I'll close all the tabs. Okay. I want some less noise. Okay. So here now we have changed a lot. Okay. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to expand this a bit and I'll duplicate everything. So I'll start selecting all the URLs that we have used to work with reviews. Okay. So these are all the URLs. I'm going to say right click, duplicate. Okay. We duplicated them. Now I'll copy all of them. So I'll select all of them. Okay. And I will move them. Okay. So I'll move them to the new collection that I have created. Okay. Here. All right. Now we are done. Now let us work on each of the URLs. Okay. So this is the URL that enables us to get the list of reviews. Okay. So this gives us the list of reviews against a particular company. Okay. But now this will change to getting the reviews. So let me head over to the controller and let us see what all we are accepting. So I'll close this and I'll close this. Yeah. So here if you scroll down, so if you are getting the review, so this is a delete mapping, get mapping, post mapping and get mapping. So this is getting all the reviews and we are passing the company ID. Okay. So now if you go to the implementation over here, okay, here, so we are getting the reviews by company. Okay. So this is going to change. And here, what we are going to have is it will first point to 8083 like so. Now, after changing the port, I'm going to restructure this URL. So I'm going to say reviews like so, and I'm going to say question mark company ID. So I'm going to say company ID, and I will be caps. So just make sure you don't make any typos, and I'll pass in 1 over here. So the moment you add this thing over here, you will see that this particular part is automatically filled in. So this is the query parameters. Okay. So you can actually remove query parameters from here, and you can even come here and you can add the parameters, or you can directly type in like I did over here. Okay. So if you want to save with some typing effort and want to avoid some syntax errors, you can make use of this interface over here. Okay. And we have passed in 1 over here. Let me say send. We will get empty array list, which is perfectly fine because right now no reviews exist. So I'll just copy this URL and I'll give this as the URL name over here. Okay. I'll hit save. Now let us try creating a review. Okay. So we are going to add a review into the system. So here I'm going to again say reviews like so. Okay. Now this is a review against which company. So I'll pass in the query parameters this way. So I'll say company ID. Let us add it against the company 1. Okay. And here in the post request, I'll change this to 8083. And let us check the body. So body is also perfectly fine. Okay. Now let us see by triggering this request. So you can see review added successfully. Let me copy the URL and let me replace it over here. Okay. Now let us try getting the reviews. So I'll go to the previous tab and I'll get the review, like all the reviews for company ID 1. You can see this works perfectly fine, right? So this is done. Now let us try getting a particular review. Okay. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to head over to this request URL. I'll first rename the port. And here I'm going to say reviews /1. Okay. And let us trigger this request. So this works perfectly fine. Okay. And the reason it's working fine is if you go to controller to get a review, like to get a particular review, this is the mapping that you have. And this is what you defined here. Okay. So it works perfectly fine. Now let us try updating a review. Okay. So I'll say 8083. Okay. I'll say reviews. Okay. And reviews /1. So let us try updating this review, and I'm going to pass these parameters. Okay. So in the body over here, we will also need to specify the company ID. Okay. So I can say company ID and I'll say 1. I'll keep this as 1 itself and I'll send the request. You can see review updated successfully. Now, if you try to get the review, so let me get the review. You'll see we have the updated review right now. Okay. And the put request works fine. So I'll update the name over here. I'll hit save. Okay. For this one also, I'll update the name and I'll hit save. Now let us test the delete one. So I can say 8083 reviews /1. Okay. And if I run this, so this deleted the review. Okay. And if you try getting the review now, you don't have any reviews. Okay. So everything is working perfectly fine. I'll just update the name here. Okay. So we have successfully refactored our review microservice to work in the microservices architecture without any dependency. Now here in this refactoring, we made use of path variables. So here we made use of path variables. So this is a path variable. And here we use the query parameters. So you can see the query parameters. Okay. So both were used, and query parameters is something we use for the first time. So why are query parameters being used and what are they? So query parameters are optional parameters in a URL, okay, that modify the behavior of the request. So if you take a look at a website, you will notice the pagination functionality. Okay, so let me show this to you. So if you go to Google, okay, and let me go to google.com and let me search for, let's say, Oracle Java. So I say Oracle Java, I get some results. Now if I scroll down and if I go to second page, okay, you will see some query parameters over here. Okay, you can see this is the search result, like this is a search query. Okay, you have start equal to 10. So start equal to 10 means I'm starting from the 10th result, which means I'm on page 2. Okay, so it has all the information about this particular request. So if I change this to 1 and if I say enter, okay, it didn't work. So start is equal to 1. So if I change this to 0 over here, start equal to 0 and ed, like VED is equal to 0. And if I hit enter, you will be returning to first page. Okay, so this is the first page now. So these are query parameters on the basis of which Google works and gives you the search results. Okay. Now, when do you use path variables? So here you saw we were also using path variables. So when you pass a parameter in the path itself, okay, it talks about the hierarchy. Okay, that is used to signify hierarchy over here. Okay, so within reviews, you give me the one with ID 1. But here, since company ID is not the part of this microservice, we have accepted it as a query parameter. Okay, so that is why we changed this structure like this. Okay, so this will be like the design decisions that you will face when you are designing your APIs. Okay, you can't have an API in review microservice that starts with company, because company does not exist in this particular entity. Okay, so that's the structure change what we did. All right, now this is how we have been able to refactor our microservice. So I hope you all have a good idea as to what we did and why we did, and I hope you all have been able to follow along. Okay, so that's about this class. I shall see you all soon. Thank you. So now we have our microservices set up. So if you take a look at the project, okay, I have 4 instances of Intellij IDEA running. Okay, so here I have one instance, okay, and this is the job microservice. Then I have another instance which is the company microservice, and this is up and running. And then I have review microservice instance which is up and running. Okay, so you can either work this way or you can combine all 3 projects into a single view. Okay, and let me show you how you can do that. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to stop review. I'm going to close this project review. I'm going to also close the company MS, and I'll close this. Now within job microservice, okay, you have job microservice here. Okay, so I'll just close all of this. Okay, now what you can do is you can click over here on Maven. Okay, so this is the Maven icon that you will have to the right hand side. And what you can do is you can add the other 2 microservices as Maven project. So let me show you what happens when you add. So I'll say add Maven projects. I'll go to company microservice. Okay, and I'll say okay. Now the moment I do this, the company microservice project will come up over here. Okay, you can see over here. You can even add the review microservice. The moment you do that, it will come up over here. So with this, what we are doing is we have a single view for all 3 microservices. Okay, so let me close all the tabs. Okay, these are our microservices. All right, and you have a single view. So let me show you. If you go to services over here, so this is the services icon over here. Okay, let me open this services. So here I am seeing the services related to Docker. So I'll just collapse this. So by clicking on this icon here, and you can click on add a service. Okay, so I'll say run configuration type. Okay, I'll select application, and you can see the application job microservice application has come up over here. Okay, so this is added. So you can either run the application by right click and stop, rerun, and you can do all the operations from here itself, or you can go to the microservice. So I can open job microservice, src, main, Java, and I can even run it from here. This is perfectly fine. So there are no issues as such by clicking on this red icon. Okay. Now let us do this for both the other microservice. So I'll go over here, main, Java, and I can open this company microservice and I'll run this. The moment I run this, you will see this service appear over here. Okay. And you can see both of them are running now in a single pane. So here you have company microservice, you have job microservice. And if you click on job microservice, you will see the logs for job microservice. If you click on company microservice, you will see the logs for company microservice. Okay. Now let us start the review microservice. So here I'll go to src, main, Java, review microservice, and I'll run this. And you will see review microservice also appear over here under the service tab. Now from here, you can manage all three microservices. So you can select and stop a particular microservice. If you have made any change, you can select and rerun from here. You can click on this icon here. Okay. So all of these things are possible. Now, if I want to stop, I can stop at one go. Like I can stop all of them, or I can click on the top icon over here at the top. If you click on this, it will ask you which service you want to stop. If I want to stop all three, I can say stop all three. But right now what has happened is we have got a unified view and a single view for all the microservices where we'll be able to make changes in the single view. Okay, so we don't need to switch different windows. So you can follow either of the approach. Okay, you can either have different IDE windows for different microservices, or you can like configure it this way like I'm doing. So it's all up to your preference and how you prefer or how you want to structure your project. So this is about this class. I just wanted to show you how you can get this unified view, and you can also test all three microservices. They all are running together at one go. So you can see here company microservice 8081, job microservice 8082, and review microservice 8083. So 8080 port is left. If you want, you can run the monolithic app that we created on 8080. So it's the default port for that application. All right. So this is done and we have a better view for microservices. So let us now configure our microservices to work with the PostgreSQL. Okay. So right now, if you head over to the browser, okay. So let me open the browser and let me go to localhost :8080 and let me say h2-console. So you have different versions of, so on 8081 you have, so one second, I'll copy this, I'll go inside. So this is the H2 schema or the H2 database interface for the company microservice. You can open the similar one for, I can say 8082, and you can log in there, and this is for job. Okay, you can see all job related information here and the schema here. And this one 8083, so this is the one that we have defined for reviews. Okay, so there are three H2 consoles that exist. Okay, now what we need to do is we need to get these changes migrated to PostgreSQL. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to first make some configuration changes in our application. Okay, and I'm going to close all the tabs. I'm going to switch over to application.properties file for all my microservices. So this is for company, Okay, so let me do it one by one. Okay, so I'll first comment this. Okay, so I've commented this part. Now we'll switch over to our monolithic application, and we have already defined the PostgreSQL configuration. So I'll add that here. Okay, and here instead of job app, I'll say job. So this is the database that I will use. Okay. Also, one more thing we need to add is we need to add the dependency. Okay. So for dependency, you can switch over to start.spring.io over here. You can say PostgreSQL explore. Okay. So this is the build.gradle. I'll select Maven and you'll get the pom.xml generated. So if you scroll down here, you have this dependency. So I'll copy this and I'll add this to my company microservice. So if I scroll down here, I can add it anywhere over here. Okay. Now I'll reload these Maven changes. Okay. Also, I'll have to restart the company microservice. Okay. So I'll be doing that shortly. Okay. So I believe the changes are done. Let us check if PostgreSQL container is running, because if we are trying to create the database connection, if we restart this microservice, what will happen is we are trying to create this database connection. So the PostgreSQL instance should be up and running. So let us check that. So here in PowerShell, I'm going to say docker-ps, and you can see the Postgres container is up and running. Okay, and you can access it from 5050. So we need to access it via pgadmin. So I'll have to go to localhost 5050. So I'll go over here in the browser and I'll say localhost 5050. Okay, and this loads the pgadmin browser. Okay, now I'll select the Postgres container which we had created. Okay. And what I will do is I will create a new database over here and I'll call this database as job. So that is a database that we just defined in the microservice, because this is where we will connect. And right now here, we don't have any schemas. Okay. So here, if you see, you don't have any table over here, not schemas. So we have schemas, and under schemas, we don't have any table. So if I go back to my project here. Okay. So I did a small mistake. So in the company microservice, I have added the job database. So I have to say company over here. Okay. And since we are in company microservice, I need to create a database with company, not job. Okay. So I'll create a database with company name, and this is empty. So don't worry about the job database that we created, because we'll anyways use it when we configure the job microservice. So that's fine. So we have the tables empty over here. Now what I can do is let me rerun this microservice. So I'll go over here. I'll select company microservice. I'll select rerun. So this will restart my microservice over here. Okay. And you can see it's started. Okay. Now, if you switch over here and if you refresh, you have this table here. So this is working perfectly fine, and we have migrated the company microservice to that of PostgreSQL. Now let us do the same for job as well. Okay. So I'll collapse the company microservice. I'll open job, src, and I'll go to main, resources, application.properties. Okay. Now within this properties file, I will add the configuration that we have added for company. Okay. So I'll add it over here like so. Okay. And we will have to comment these part. Okay. So I'll just create some room here and I'll comment this. And instead of company here, since we are in job, I'll say job over here. I'll keep the rest of the details the same. Okay. And this is a pom.xml for company. So we need to open the pom.xml for that of job. Now what do we need to do? Yes, we need to add the dependency. So I'll add the dependency here, reload the Maven changes, and I'll rerun the service. Okay. So I'll go to job microservice, I'll rerun. So the application reruns and it's running now. Now, if you go to job database, so here, everything was empty earlier. Okay, it was empty. Now, if I hit refresh, you will have the job table appear, which means it's working perfectly fine. Okay. Now, let us create a database for review. So I'll say create a database, review, save. Okay. Now let's connect the review microservice to our database. So I'll copy the dependency and I'll collapse this. I'll head over to review microservice and I'll add the dependency here. Done. I'll reload the Maven changes. So I'll have to open the application.properties file here. I'll comment all of this. And I need to copy the configuration from here. So I'll get all of this configuration into this application.properties and I'll change the database name here. So we are done. Now let me rerun the review microservice as well. So I'll rerun. So the application has started, as you can see. Now let us refresh. So if you go to schemas and if you go under tables, you will see the review table appear over here. Okay. So which means that we have successfully connected all three microservices to three different databases. So these are three different databases in PostgreSQL. As you can see, this is running in a Docker container. Okay. And you have three microservices connect to it. Okay. So we have successfully completed the migration from H2 database to that of PostgreSQL. Hello everybody, welcome back. So what we have done is we have configured all the three projects that we have, like the company microservice, job microservice, and the review microservice to point to PostgreSQL. Now what is happening is here in the monolithic application that I have. So in this particular application, here I have a docker-compose.yml file. All right. And I am managing the containers from here. So what we can do is we can even move this file into any one of our microservices. So I'll just copy this. Okay. And I'll switch over to our ID and I can choose any of the microservices. So I'll go over here and here I can say, give me a file and I can say docker compose.yml like so. And here I'll paste the exact same settings that I had in my monolithic application. So you can go through the settings again if you wish to. Okay. But what I want to do really over here is I want to manage my Docker containers from my microservices. So you can add this file anywhere, like wherever you wish to. Ideally, this should be in the root of the project. Okay. So since you have company microservice, job microservice, and review microservice. So this can be ideally in the Spring Boot project, like Spring Boot folder over here. So you can see courses/Spring Boot. But we are not seeing that directory in Intellij, and I wish to manage this right from within the Intellij. So what I've done is I've taken any microservice and I have created a Docker Compose file over there. All right. So you can see this appear over here. And now what we can do is I will turn down the Docker containers that I had started from my job application, like the monolithic application. So I'll switch over to Windows PowerShell. And here I am in my monolithic application. So I'm going to say docker compose down. So this is the command to turn down the Docker containers defined within the Docker Compose file. So you can turn them up by saying docker compose up. But if you say docker compose down, like it will just take everything down and it will remove the containers. Okay. So this is done. Now what I can do is I can migrate to one directory up and I can say company microservice. And you can see I have the docker-compose.yml file. So I'll just clear the screen. I'll say docker-compose and I'll say up. So this is again going to create the containers for me. Okay. So you will see the containers appear over here. So you can see the container was up and running. Now what you can do is you can head over to the browser. Here in the browser, we will access pgadmin. And you will be asked to enter a password. So I'll enter a password and we will add a server here. So I'll again say Postgres container. Okay. And in connection, I'll enter the connection name. So I'll say Postgres, username is embarkx, and I'll add the password as also embarkx. And I'll hit save. So we are connected to the PostgreSQL container. Okay. Now what we can do is here, if you see, we have some database requirements. So we need databases like review, company, and job. So I'll go ahead and I'll create all the three databases. So I'll say review, save. I'll say company. I'll hit save and I'll even create a database for job. I'll hit save. So we have everything set up now. Okay. So this was a bit of repetitive thing because earlier what we had done is we had created the PostgreSQL databases in that of the instance that was created from the Docker YAML file. And this Docker YAML file was from the monolithic application. So I just moved things here. Okay. Now you could have directly run this. So you could have directly gone and instead of saying docker compose down in the monolithic application, you could have directly run it from here. But the thing is you would have got a conflict. Okay. You would have got a container name conflict. Okay. We could have managed this. So we are all set now. Okay. This was a little bit repetitive because what we had to do is we moved the docker compose file. So this was a bit repetitive, but now we are all set to work and all set to test our application. So now what we can do is we can start all our services and we can begin testing our application. Okay. So I'm going to start the job service. I'll even select the company service and I'll start that. We'll have review service as well. So let us keep an eye on the logs. So you can see here, this service is started, the job one. We have company also started. And then we have review also started. So what we can do is we can switch over to Postman and try accessing these services. So now here you can see in pgadmin, which I have open here, you can see some activity happening. And this is all about creating the tables here. Okay, so if you go over here, you will see the tables being created because we just started the services. Now what we can do is we can head over to Postman. And I can go to job microservice. I can say, get me all the jobs. Of course, you won't get any data right now. So what I can do is I can create a job. Okay, so I'll create this particular job. Let me see what happens. So job has been added successfully. I'll even create a company. Okay, so I'll create this company 1. I'll create this company 2. Okay, and you can even get the list of companies. So you can see it's working fine. And if I try to get the jobs, you will see the jobs are also coming in. Also, let us add something to the reviews. So I'll add this particular thing to review against the company ID 1. So this is added successfully. And now if I say get reviews, you will get the reviews here. Okay. Now we can head over to PostgreSQL like pgadmin and you can refresh it over here. Now here, if you go to tables, So under tables, you'll see company, and we can say view all rows. So you can see over here that the data that we were adding is being saved into the database. And you can check this for all the services. So you can go to job and schemas, and I can scroll down to tables. And here also I can see the data being added here. So we have added one job so far. Okay, you can see all the information coming in. You can even go to review here, and here under schema, you should be able to see all the tables. And if you click on the table and if you try to see the data, you are going to see the data appear over here. So it's working perfectly fine. Our configurations have been perfect and things are working flawlessly with the database. So this is about the testing. You can do some more testing. You can play around with different API calls and see how the data is being reflected into the database. All right. Thank you.